Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mikey Aaronworth, signing on to the sign-off of Frameworth Podcast for yet another week. And I'm joined this week with just one man, one very special man. My sidekick is what you know him as. It is Brian Aaronworth, the president of Frameworth Sports Marketing, joining me in studio for an episode that I'm kind of looking forward to because we've been pretty serious about what it means to be involved in sports memorabilia and the world of sports marketing. A lot of our guests have shared similar stories about their interests and expeditions and what got them into it and this and that. But one thing we found is that a lot of our guests are fairly keen on telling funny stories, because it turns out that being involved in this world has a lot to do with just being friends and friendly with the people who you would think may otherwise not have a sense of humor, like the athletes and the people in charge of the players' associations and things like that. You end up at a lot of parties and events that get you mingling with these people, and you get to see them in a very human way. And Dad, Brian Aaronworth, if I didn't mention that, one of the experiences that you have learned about in this industry is going to these sorts of events and becoming friends with people who you once looked up to, right? And seeing them in this different light. And it turns out that when you get behind closed doors with these people, very often they are more funny than most of the people that you know in your day-to-day life. Do you have any reasons why that might be? Why do hockey players, for example, have such a sense of humor, more so than most people in your life, like your friends and family? And we'll name them by name in a little bit.
Well, you know what? It's the culture that they grow up in. You know, they spend so much time on the road together, and it all starts with the pranks and the punking people and
Ashton Kutcher throwback. I like that. Yeah.
And then, you know, it just develops and they get a kick out of it. And so they try and one up themselves. Then they like to hang out with people like our former guests, Jimmy Jerome or Brad Jansen, who are funny in their own right and keep them laughing. And so all of that comes to, because it's a serious business.
Yes.
I mean, they're on the ice, it's serious, and then they get off the ice and they want to break.
It's the only way to let loose. Now, you mentioned there Brad Jansen and Jimmy Jerome, and there are two things I want to bring up conveniently that have to do with those two people. Now, one is Jimmy Jerome. We had him on the podcast last week. Notoriously one of our most well-received episodes. Jimmy Jerome, a broadcaster and podcaster in his own right, a very, very funny human being, told a ton of stories last week on the episode, on the podcast. If you haven't gone back and listened to that, feel free to do so. It's available on YouTube. It's available on all your podcasts. I'm not sure where you're listening or watching this, but we had discussed on that podcast a giveaway that we're going to do in tandem with one of his podcasts, which is The Suspendables, which he does with Russ Courtnall.
Right.
Now, what we're going to be doing, and here's the official announcement, he's going to be announcing it on his podcast as well, but if you want to enter yourself into a draw for either a signed Mitch Marner jersey or a signed Sidney Crosby jersey, both Adidas Pro Weight jerseys, all you're going to have to do is make sure that you are subscribed to the Sign Off podcast, which if you're listening to this, chances are you are on any podcast platform or YouTube, and also subscribe to the Suspendables podcast. You can find that.
He's got a great podcast with
a
Russ
great
Courtnall.
podcast. Yeah. If you enjoyed anything about his storytelling prowess on our podcast last week, combined with the fact that, as we say, hockey players tend to have a very funny sense of humor, Russ Courtnall is no different. They have a weekly podcast that they do. You can look that up on any podcast app. And we recommend doing so not just so that you can enter yourself into this draw, but so that you can actually find another podcast that you love to listen to every week. So all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed to both the Sign Off podcast and the Suspendables podcast. Take a screenshot of those and email the screenshots to SignOffPod@frameworth.com, SignOffPod @frameworth.com. For a second there, I didn't know if I was going to get the spelling right, which would have been a big shame. But make sure you do that. You can tune into our Twitter, Instagram for more information on that as well. We're going to be announcing the winner next week on the podcast, so next Thursday. You've got plenty of time to sign up, but make sure you do so soon, and make sure you show some love to the Suspendables and go give them a listen. Now, that's the Jim Jerome side of things.
Right.
The other person you mentioned, friend of the show, Brad Jansen, who's been on this twice as well. Also some great episodes in his own right. Now, you have told me some stories relating to Brad Jansen. And one of the reasons why he's seen so much success in his career when it comes to dealing with players, athletes, teams, etc., is because they're also willing and excited to have him around them when they're in the locker room or at a business meeting, etc., etc. He really lightens the mood.
Right.
You've had some of these specific experiences with him. Do you have any that come to mind that may...
Well, you gave me, 20 minutes to think of some stories.
Well,
I think the topics today should be funny stories.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Yes, sometimes we fly by the seat of our pants here.
No, that's we've got so much to talk about. You can give me any topic, and we can talk forever.
You're such a gifted orator. I just assumed that you'd be able to pick it up.
After my son. So, in 5 minutes, I came up with, I think, a few interesting, funny stories that started with, maybe Brad and our friendship, which has grown.
And the reason why you're doing that is because what we wanted to do, as we mentioned, we spent a lot of time talking about the serious side of sports marketing.
Right.
We're going to start this series of episodes where we're talking about specific funny stories that you found yourself in, and this is going to be the first of those episodes. So, without further ado, you had mentioned Brad Jansen drawing you in.
Brad is hilarious, and I think that we were down in Salt Lake City to watch the Olympics. Now, this is when I started traveling everywhere to follow the guys that we were working with and that. And he had introduced me to Wayne. So Wayne was GM for the team at the time. So we're all in Salt Lake City together, and you're going to have some fun. Like, put yourself in the right place and shit's going to happen, right? So one night prior to one of the games, or a few nights before the game, so we're out in a bar. I think we had a couple of players. I don't remember exactly who, because Brad always had an entourage of players with him that want to hang out.
Here's the funny thing about Brad Jansen that we should say is, while most people who are in a situation like that will seek the players out, the players will seek out Brad Jansen because they know he's going to...
What's up tonight? Where are you going?
Exactly.
We're going to have some fun. So it was an off day for the players, and we had a couple of, I think Tom Bitove was there, a couple of player reps from Nike. I think they were sponsoring the thing at that time.
I believe they did the jerseys that year, right?
I think Vinny Gomes from who ended up in Nike Golf, but he was with them. So we're all there just having a few pops.
Yep.
The bar that we were in was so jammed up, there were no tables and no room at the bar. So we found a place in a hallway, or not a hallway, but in the middle of the bar, which was at the bottom of a set of stairs that came down from the second floor, which was also jammed. And the stairs came down about halfway, had a platform, and then they went 90 degrees to the rest of the way. And we're standing right in front of that 90-degree turn, which is about eye height.
Okay.
So we're having a few drinks, and it got kind of crazy. And Brad says, "Want to see something funny?" And what are you talking about? He said, "Who's got a shoelace?" Because half of us were wearing loafers.
Okay, of course.
Right? So one guy has a shoelace. I think I did. I'm not giving it to Brad because I know I'm never going to end up with it back, and I'm going to walk around without a shoelace. But another guy was stupid enough to give it to him. So he gives him a shoelace, and he goes to the bar, and he gets a piece of tape.
Right.
He says, "Who's got a dollar bill?" So I give him a dollar bill because I can afford that. And he puts the tape to the dollar bill in the shoelace. And for about a half an hour after, he had us in stitches howling, because what he did was he hid below the stairwell with a long shoelace and a dollar bill on the platform. And every time somebody walked down the stairs, they'd see the dollar bill.
Of course.
And then as soon as he knew that they were going to reach down and pick it up, he would pull it away. And the person looked so stupid
and embarrassed
that they would reach down to get this dollar bill. Who's not going to pick up a dollar bill?
Now imagine the icing on the cake in that story is, imagine you're embarrassed. You hear a room full of people laughing at you because the crowd is starting to surround you guys, knowing that another person's going to come down, and you look, and there are players from Team Canada laughing at you for bending over trying to get a $1 bill.
Now, I don't know whether they recognized him or not. Most likely they did, because it was like one of those bars that we all hang out in. And so I go, you know what? We just were in stitches the whole time. He did this for about a half an hour. There were people that were ready to fight until they saw who they were going to have to fight.
Exactly, yeah.
There was other people that laughed with us, but the looks on their faces. I mean, it's a stupid little prank.
That's what I love about it. It's so simple, and yet you have these fully grown men who play hockey for a living and are there to represent the best of their country, just giddy over the fact that someone has bent over to get a $1 bill and misses it. That's awesome.
So that leads to 2003,
right,
where we go out to Edmonton for the first Heritage Classic,
right,
and
if before we move on from the Olympics, because I want to say one thing that I remember so well about the Salt Lake Olympics. Obviously, Canada won. It was the first time they'd won in a very long time. What I remember most is you came home early from those Olympics. It up.
I still regret this.
I think it was a 50-year drought between Canada winning gold medals, and we were sitting there as a family celebrating. And you could barely watch the game. Part of you was cheering for Canada to win, and the other part was like, if they win and I purposely wasn't there, I'll never be able to live it down.
I don't know why I came home. I just got antsy.
Well, there's a family that loves you. I don't know what that might mean.
No, it had nothing to do with that. I probably had to get prepared to do some work.
That's fair.
The next day, and I wanted to, jump all over it if they did win. So it's part, business, but I missed that game. I could have been at that gold medal game.
And the party afterwards.
Which I would have been invited to, and it was crazy.
We mentioned this on an earlier episode, when it was just you and I speaking again, about the ways in which watching sports have changed for us, where when a team that we love is doing well, we have to stop drinking. We have to start planning the next day because we're thinking, now we cannot party with everyone. We need to meet in the office.
That's not always the case. You just come in hungover.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. So you mentioned, though, 2003 in the Heritage Classic. I believe Wayne Gretzky would have been there as well. And
that was the first Heritage Classic, and they convinced Wayne to put the skates back on. Now, he had been doing his fantasy camp, so he was still and still, I'm sure, could outskate most people. But he hasn't put the skates on for a while, I think, since Winnipeg. But he was out there playing in the Heritage Classic. So he set up for Brad and I and some friends and his family. Janet and the kids were there. Paulina was there. In fact, she sang the national anthem, or she sang something. I think it was the national anthem, as well as another song in between games. So they played the alumni game first, and then they had an actual NHL game afterwards. And it was freezing. Yeah. It was sub-zero. And I don't know why I thought to do this, but I brought my spider ski suit, head to toe. So I was toasty. I was fine. But I didn't really need it, and I almost didn't bring it because Wayne had set up a private box for us to sit up in.
Right.
And so it turns out that the private box belonged to Comrie.
Mike Comrie.
Not Mike, his dad, who owned the Brick.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So... and Wayne was good friends with the family, and Mike at the time was holding out for a new contract, I believe. Mike Comrie.
Right.
So the first thing we see when we're walking up is we're all sitting there with our hat toques and whatever, but this guy's got a scarf wrapped around his face, walking up through the crowd to get to the private box. And what was the name of the stadium? It's a big stadium out there, Edmonton's Commonwealth, I think.
Okay.
So anyway, so we're walking up, and Mike's at the time he's holding out for a new contract, and he's not supposed to be out there. He's at this serious stuff.
Yeah.
And this guy's walking with us, and he's got this scarf wrapped around it. He gets up there. It's Mike.
Oh.
So he wants to see the game, but he doesn't want anybody to know he's out enjoying himself.
So he wrapped his face up.
He wrapped his scarf. I mean, it was cold, but it wasn't that cold.
Could have gotten away with that a lot easier nowadays, right? With the mask on.
Right. Now we're up there, and...
Because also Mike Comrie is not a huge guy.
No.
In fact, he's quite short for a hockey player. So if he wraps himself up in, maybe it's someone's kid, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Not quite like that. But so now we're up in the box, and the game's going on, and about getting close to, I think they had one of the periods they had a stoppage in play or in between. I don't know how
usually they
set it up.
stop playing during the
No, but I don't know if
intermissions,
they had 3 periods for that game or it was just a halftime. I can't remember. But for some reason, Wayne had asked somebody to bring Janet and the kids down to the ice surface in between at that stoppage.
Well, one thing we should mention is that this was the first outdoor game that was done as, now we do the Winter Classic and the Stadium Series,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. This was so new at the time that
Right.
it would probably, he wanted them down there because this was a moment in history.
Right. And so, and in the Commonwealth Stadium, the gap between the seats and the ice surface was right in the center of the field. So there's probably a 20-yard gap before you even get from this where the seats are
right
to the ice surface. And there was nobody around there but the players. So I said, somebody said, well, who's going down? Who can take Janet? I said, well, I don't have any passes to get down there. Janet had them all. So somebody said, well, here, they didn't want to do it. I think it was an older gentleman that was a friend of Wayne. So he gave me his all access pass. So I said, oh, I'm happy to take him down, go right down to the ice surface. So I take Janet down. Well, she's gorgeous. So she's wearing these tight jeans.
She's very fashionable.
Yes.
And she's not going to put...
And a bomber jacket. That's
Right,
it.
right.
It's like 20 below.
Yeah.
I'm wearing my spider ski suit, which I had to put all back on. I look like a snowman.
I was going to say, the way that you and Janet dress is essentially diametrically opposite. There's you that is like, I know we're here. There's going to be photos taken. I am putting on my red and white spider ski jacket, which was cool 20 years ago. And then Janet is saying, I don't care if I'm cold. I'm going to wear what makes me look good.
I think she got pretty cool because she didn't last very long down there. But we took them all down. Wayne had them all on the ice for some photos in between periods. And so Janet, so I got to get back up, and somebody asked me to do, I saw Russ Courtnall there. I turned around, and she had already started back with the kids because she knew the route, right? So I didn't need to take her back. So I'm looking around, and I go, well, what's, stopping me from sitting down here? Because it was a long way away from the box.
Right.
The box was the last place you want to be to get a good vantage point because way up high, and, you have to...
The box is where you want to go if you're holding out with a contract dispute and you don't want to be seen, right? That's
pretty much it. Yeah, it did have its own bathroom, which was great. So so I sat down there and I'm walking around and nobody's kicking me out. So the game starts up again, and I go down to the corner where Wayne's shooting against the Montreal alumni, and I'm leaning on the glass.
Yeah.
Opposite me is the camera on this line that's going back and forth. And all the other TV cameras that were there. And I'm sitting there watching the whole last period, leaning on the glass, and nobody kicked me out. And I was the only one along the glass. Like, there was nobody anywhere else except some maintenance guys that were walking around. And I watched the whole third period from that. And the funny part was, a year later, I'm down in the NHL offices, and I didn't think anything of it. I'm down in the NHL offices, and I'm waiting to meet with Gary Bettman or somebody, one of the officials down there, the big shots.
You still have the all-access pass on your neck at this point.
No, it was a different
meeting. You never
meeting.
took that thing off, yeah.
No. And I'm watching, they got the Heritage Classic on TV, like looped on the video, right? I guess they made a video of it. And I'm watching, and there I am. Every time it passed, I'm there. Who's that guy leaning on the glass?
That's amazing.
And then after the game was over, walked over, so still hanging out there, and the players all get together. They want photos on the ice. And if you remember, there was a big hoopla about this guy from CBC who was a goofy guy, had a helmet on. He dressed up like an old-timer hockey player with the old helmet and that. And he jumped into the photo. Well, I was on the ice taking photos, too, with some of the guys I knew, like Russ Courtnall and Wayne, and then they stopped to take the photo, and I'm thinking...
You're talking about like the preamminent photo that marked the occasion.
Right.
It wasn't just people going around
No,
taking photos.
there was a lot of that,
Yeah,
which I got into.
Exactly, yeah.
Wayne and Russ said, come on out in the ice, take a picture, which was unbelievable.
Cool.
And so then I sit there and I'm thinking, should I jump into this photo? Like, nobody was stopping me.
Yeah.
I could have been the other guy, but I would have taken so much flack. I thought smart enough, and it had been probably a 20-minute, 30-minute time frame since I had my last beer in the things.
Probably
so
a good thing.
that if I kept drinking, I probably would have been in that photo and maybe lost my NHL license over
That's
that.
the thing is high stakes, high reward, but high risk as well. You put yourself in a situation. I've had a few of those where I could have been very close to making some
Well,
bad
nobody
decisions.
realized that the CBC guy was in. All the players were focused in on the camera and that. And then afterwards, everybody said, who is that guy in the photo?
Yeah.
And then they figured it out, and he took a big beating over that one.
My thing that I find amazing about this story is I have such a guilty conscience, and I'm so in my head as it stands that if I were in your situation, sitting on the glass, while some people would be watching it thinking, wow, I'm so close, this is so cool, oh, look, the puck's going down the ice, oh, man, they're right against the glass, I would be thinking, I really hope no one notices me here. I really hope no one. Like, I wouldn't have been able to enjoy a second of that.
Well, there was a little bit of that too. I kept looking side to side, see if anybody was coming for me, kick me off.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
nobody did, so it was great.
So your memory of that night would have been crystal clear. It would have been fine. It was, one of the best memories you probably had.
It just kept going on and on.
Mine is from that night is quite the opposite, and we don't need to get into it. I was quite young at the time. I wasn't there. I don't even believe I was working for Frameworth at the time. I was at a family party in Winnipeg, a get-together, kind of a family reunion, and that, dear listener, was the first time that I got blackout drunk as a young kid. So I don't remember anything about that night, I except for the shame I had the next day and the stern talking to I got.
Took you to task over
that. Yeah,
nobody knew
did.
You were hiding out in the basement drinking.
They all
it
knew.
Seems to be an Aaronworth family trait.
Yeah, exactly. Now, that's one tournament. It seems as though you're getting a hand from some of the people who are taking part in the tournament to say, hey, Brian, why don't you come on board? We know you well enough to not do stupid things like jump in a group photo or something like that. So come along. You're not getting in anyone's way. You're not getting in any trouble. What are some of the other ones? I know golf tournaments are
a lot of great stories happen away from the rink. That's where the guys relax. They can have a few pops and enjoy themselves and tell stories. And there's so many of them. But I had a couple of friends at one time. I was doing work, all the work, backup stuff for WG Authentic.
Right.
So, and we mentioned Mike Brown many times, who ran Wayne's company, and we became very good friends. And shout out to his son, Bobby and Janelle, who are getting married in September.
Yeah, so and Alex, who had a huge hand in maintaining WGA and especially the Wayne Gretzky golf tournament.
Right.
Yeah.
So congratulations to those two. We'll see you in September in St. Louis. Nice. But anyway, so a friend of mine, Mike Wilson and Mark Hawkins.
Mike Wilson you'd recognize as the ultimate Leafs fan.
Right.
He's got the notoriously the largest collection of Toronto Maple Leafs and just sports memorabilia.
And he has his own podcast too, Ultimate Leafs Fan, or I think it.
Look up
name.
Mike Wilson and you'll
Mike Wilson, and he
it.
does it with Rick Five. Anyway, so Mike and Mark were at this charity auction months before and bought. They were doing quite well at the time in the money business and bought, I think it was...
The money business?
Yes.
What is the money business?
Well,
we're in the wrong business.
Right. They bought an opportunity to play golf with Wayne Gretzky.
Oh, okay.
And I think they paid something like $100,000.
Wow.
At his club in Sherwood, which is an absolute gorgeous club.
Right.
And so they were going down a certain date. So he had phoned me and said, can I take some... Do you have any blank jerseys that I can get Wayne to sign for $100,000? Wayne's going to sign a few jerseys.
And we should say that $100,000 is not necessarily going into Wayne's pocket. It's
it was good. It was charitable.
It
was a prize for charities. So it turns out the next day, so I had arranged a trip down to LA to work with Mike for some product development, and it turns out that it was the day after Mike and Mark were there. So I said, hey, I might see you down there. I don't know. But I got some business to do with Mike. Well, we talked about Mike before. He didn't like to spend too long in the office before he'd want to go play golf. And I always took my clubs to LA because...
Just in case. Not going to miss out an opportunity to play on Sherwood.
Well, it wasn't... We'd play all sorts of courses Mike had contacts with. Sherwood was never an option because it was Wayne's private course. Fair. But he said, hey, Wayne just called, said, let's go out and play Sherwood. Jesus, Sherwood. Wayne Gretzky, play with him. So the day before, my buddies, Mike and Mark, they're playing for $100,000. I'm playing for free. So
did they ever find out about that?
Oh, yeah, because so we ended up seeing him, I think, down there at some point. But anyway, so we get there and we get on the first tee. Now, this is Sherwood Country Club, so you've got the biggest names in movie and sports. They're all there. They had George Bush, Jack Nicklaus, all these guys, these big stars had lockers in there.
Sure.
And a lot of them, Tom Selleck lived on the course.
Oh, wow.
So when they got together, and golf is a game that you can gamble at, you got your handicap going. You know, I used to play for a few bucks even when I couldn't afford it. So these guys are used to playing for big money. So we get to the first tee, and we've got a golf cart, which is kind of standard for those type of courses, and the 2 golf carts. And then these 2 guys come up to each of us and say, well, I'm your caddy. And I said, well, we really don't need a caddy. You know,
Right.
We got the yardage markers. We got a golf cart. What are you going to do? So we go up there. We for caddy for you. So they go up in the front and they wait for your shot to come down, and they make sure that you can find your ball in case you're in the woods or something.
Amazing.
So I thought, okay, well, that's fine. I don't know what I'm going to have to pay these guys because they're Sherwood Country Club, but I'll figure it out. I hit my shot, the first shot on the first tee, and it's slicing into the woods.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
And
that sounds about right.
And we've got some money on the line.
Yeah.
Nothing like these guys play
Sure.
for. Wayne understands. I'm not playing for.
So were you in this? Were you betting against Mike and Wayne, or did Wayne?
Well,
have
Mike
his
was
own?
my partner, and Wayne had another partner.
Oh, okay, but you guys were betting.
Oh yeah, our team
cool.
2 against 2.
That's really cool.
So, so my ball goes way up, and it's slicing into the woods, and geez, what a way to start. And I get out there, and I look for the ball, and I'm going into the woods, and the guy, so I found it. So, that's good. Thank God, because I have to go back to the tee and hit another one.
Yeah.
We do play by the, or I do play by the rule.
Sure.
Well, the ball's right in the fairway. I said, boy, was that a lucky bounce? He said, no, sir. He says, you know, we kind of want you to win. I said, what?
What?
It turns out that they all have their 4 caddies, so they never have a bad lie or a bad shot because, and it's not like they instruct the guys to do this, and they kind of semi-know that they're doing it because there's so much money on the line, and the caddies, if they guys win $5,000 in a round, their tip's going to be quite big.
Oh my God.
I never had a bad lie or shot. I mean, I might have been in the woods, but there was a clear opening right away through.
I mean, you weren't a bad golfer.
No, I was playing to a 7 handicap at the time. So, and it was hilarious. And every time I went around, we became best friends, that caddy and I. And one of the caddies turns out to be just a hilarious guy that Wayne loved and would fly him anywhere he played golf. His name was Jimmy, and he had his issues over the time, but Jimmy would, and if you see him at Pebble Beach, Jimmy will be on the bag, it was last time I watched, but
that's anyway, amazing. It's one of those, like, it turns out if you want to get in tight with Wayne, just be funny and be named Jimmy. Those are the 2 things that are required. Like, it's pretty simple.
Well, that was that one. So, we can switch back.
Because there was another golf tournament that I've heard you tell a couple stories about. Obviously, the other great one, not in hockey, but in basketball, would be Michael Jordan.
Right.
He's had some golf tournaments of his own. I know that you've been around for those tournaments as well, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of the stuff we did work for, and these are big, expensive tournaments, but I was such a big avid golfer that I would contra stuff for it. So
Sure.
Michael Jordan had a big tournament at Lionhead, like major celebrities in it. And it was a celebrity pro-am. So Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, Clark Gillies, who I ended up playing with, great golfer, great guy. And so I would contra. So we had a print that we had designed by a caricature of Michael Jordan playing golf, and it was done by Andy Donato, who used to do all the cartoons for the Toronto Sun.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Very well-known artist at the time and still is. He's got some great stuff. So Andy, we commissioned him to do it, and then all the players signed the print, which
that's cool.
I wish I still have. I probably do have one tucked away because Michael signed it. And
sure.
And I think I better look for that.
I was going to say, yeah.
So anyways, we have this tournament and we're in it. But as the story goes, so they provided caddies for all the celebrities, and they wanted good caddies. So there was a friend of ours, or a friend of, I was working with Labatt at the time, and one of their reps, and I can't remember the fellow's name, got assigned to be Charles Barkley's caddy.
Now, was he a caddy, or was he?
No, he was a scratch golfer.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
they didn't. Toronto doesn't have a lot of caddies anymore. It's like it's not like the private clubs in the States. But they, when the time comes, they hire somebody that really knows the game, knows the course, and they hired this guy.
Now, was this something where you, as a part of being a member at the tournament, would you have had to have been a scratch golfer, or he just so happened to be one who could also kind of be?
No,
a good caddy?
When they were looking for caddies for the celebrities, they wanted to make sure that these guys had a quality guy on the bag.
This wasn't Labatt saying, you've sold X amount, here's your reward, you're going on. Like he was sought out to be a caddy for this.
Well, it's kind of a little bit of both. It was, they knew who the great golfers were within the company. They were a sponsor of the tournament. The tournament was looking for caddies, so it's kind of like one hand washes the other. So this guy got the caddy for Charles Barkley, and he was kind of excited about that. Young guy, but good golfer. So they get out. Anybody see Charles Barkley ever play golf? He's got the weirdest swing.
We've seen him swing clubs. I don't know if you'd call it playing golf.
Oh, it's just it's the most bizarre swing ever. But he manages to connect.
Yeah.
Okay, he's an athlete and he can connect, but he's not a great golfer, but he thinks he is. And he'd be the first to admit that. Anyway, so as the story goes, and I heard this firsthand, he's playing around and the guy starts watching his swing and saying, okay, how far? And Charles would say, how far are we? And he'd say 150 yards, sir. And he'd go, you just call me Charles. And then he'd go, what do you think? And he says, well, I think based on your swing, you need a 7-iron. I says, no, I can hit it with a 9-iron. I don't think you can hit it with a 9-iron.
Right.
And sure enough, right into the pond, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and on for about 12 or 15 holes. And now this guy's getting really frustrated because every time he recommends a club, Barkley just goes, nah, what are you talking about? I can do this. And he hits a shitty shot.
Right.
So finally they get to one hole. I don't know what it is, about 160 yards over the water to the green. And he says, what do you think I should have? He says, why are you asking me? He says, well, what do you think I should have? And he gets a little snooty, Charles. And he goes, well, he says, based on what I've seen, he says 160 yards, you're probably looking at about a 5-iron. Don't be ridiculous. He says, I can hit that green. Sure enough, he picks his own club with a 9-iron and right into the drink. And the guy looks at he looks at it and says, what the hell? Barkley's swearing. The other guy looks at him, throws the bag down on the ground and says, you get your own fucking clubs and carry them yourself. He says, I'm walking out of here. And he says this to Charles Barkley. Barkley looks at him and breaks out laughing. He's in hysterics. And he says, what are you doing? He says, I've been telling you every club to use, and I've been right every time, and you're wrong every time. You don't listen to me. You don't need me. He said, you're a big guy. Carry your own fucking clubs. So Barkley, he can't stop laughing. He said, wait, come back here. So the guy comes back. He says, what do you want? He says, you carry my bag the rest of the way. Every time you recommend a club, I'll use it.
Yeah.
Okay? They finish the 5 or 6 more holes. They go into the clubhouse, and he's still laughing. Barkley's still laughing. He says, come in. You're coming in with me. You're going to have some drinks. He says, well, caddies aren't allowed in the clubhouse. He says, you're coming with me. Nobody's stopping me. So he goes in. And he sits down with the guy and they have a few drinks. Long story short, they became best friends. Charles would invite him down to Las Vegas. This guy didn't have a lot of money. He just got married a few years back. He had some kids, I think. And he'd fly him down to Vegas to just sit and tell him stories. And they were best friends.
That's amazing.
A couple years after that, into that relationship, the guy gets cancer.
Oh.
And I was telling a story to a friend of mine who's bald because the way this story came up was he says, I try and shave my head. And the first time I did it, I had blood all over the place and I'm walking around with all. And he says, I said, well, the first time I saw somebody shave their bald head, it was Charles Barkley. And that got me in this story. And it turned out that when he passed away, the family didn't have a lot of money. Charles ran a golf tournament at Scarborough, which again I found a way into. And I came into after showering, and there's Charles shaving his head. But he came up personally to run the golf tournament. I think they raised some big money for this guy, and he still support the family. That's the kind of guy Charles Barkley was.
I mean,
and you know because you spent the night with him in another golf tournament.
The common denominator there is that Charles Barkley likes when people talk shit to him, because I was a dumb kid at a golf tournament, obviously had a little bit to drink, got introduced to Charles Barkley, and he said something about, I think I told the story on the podcast before, said something about, oh, you're about the same age as my daughter, and I was like, well, bring her here. Where's she? Why can't I be talking? I don't want to talk to you. And then he, same thing, laughed, and we sat down and drank together for the rest of the night. And by the rest of the night, I mean into the morning. He is that kind of guy. I would imagine that someone who is so naturally funny and cocky as Charles Barkley, confident, I guess, who's constantly having people say yes to him and kind of kowtow to him, you would imagine that person kind of thrives on a little bit of conflict. That's funny to them, and they don't get it from anyone because everyone's too afraid of it. And every so often someone brings that to the table, and it's like, oh, okay, I get it. You don't treat me a certain way because of who I am. You treat me a certain way because you see me as a human being, not as a celebrity, sort of. And that goes a very long way. And it's also one of those things with a guy like Charles Barkley, and I think this goes, we have Wendell Clark on the podcast. We have Doug Gilmour on the podcast. And these guys were known for being like, in Doug's case, a killer on the ice or like a bruiser, Captain Crunch. And yet their personalities are so down to earth and they are so genuine, right? Yep. Everyone sees this persona of these athletes and assumes that this is professional wrestling. Like that is who that person is no matter what. And it just isn't the case. And it's great to hear that because, we started off this podcast talking about the ways in which athletes bring their sense of humor off the ice or outside of the court. And that is common where they're just genuine human beings. And I love hearing these stories because it almost makes watching sports more difficult, because you want to hate certain players for doing certain things. And I remember when we were at the All-Star game once, and I think it was in Columbus. And obviously, big Penguins fan, big Leafs fan. So naturally, I'm going to despise the Philadelphia Flyers. That's just, it comes with the territory. That's part of sports rivalries. And who was the person you were supposed to hate on the Flyers as a member of another team or a fan of another team? Claude Giroux. You just didn't like, especially if you were a fan of Sidney Crosby. Those two butt heads, and I was obviously on Sidney's team. And then I met him by happenstance at one of the athlete parties in Columbus. And wouldn't you know it, he is the nicest human being. Yeah. And it pissed me off so much because
it's hard to hate a guy you like.
Exactly. I want it to be easy. Just put this person in their place where you are bad, so I dislike you. You are good, so I like you. And you meet them and they have a personality and you're like, okay, sports are more complicated than I would ever come to realize. And you hear those stories all the time.
That's interesting because I'm going to add that to my last little thing after the next story because Claude Giroux's parents, we met at the World Cup.
We'll go into it. Tell.
Well, I want to tell this other story first because I'll save the best for last, or I think the best for last. So back in the day, I had when I told a story about how I used to, one of my first accounts was Maple Leaf Gardens and parking right outside and just walking in. And one day I parked outside and looked across the street. And
Harold Ballard's parking lot was just the side of the street in front of
and across the street there was a restaurant that went bankrupt and they were releasing it. So I looked at it and we talked about this before. So I decided, being having some experience when I was younger, owning a bar, building a bar. And I said, okay, that would be a great location for a bar right across from Maple Leaf Gardens. So we built this bar called Garduni's. Some of you may remember it.
And this story is great. If you haven't heard this story yet, that probably means you haven't listened to the Doug Gilmour episode of this podcast. It was early on. You should definitely do that because the story of the beginnings of Maple Leaf Gardens, there was a slight involvement by Doug Gilmour in the beginning. He wasn't a partner per se, but he was a frequenter there as well as his
he
parents.
was planning to be, but then he signed a new contract and it was all inclusive for marketing. They considered the restaurant marketing, so he had to back out. But anyway, we have this bar, and I'm hanging out there a little bit while I'm running Frameworth, and then I've got the bar going, and one day I'm there for lunch, and in walks, and I'm not going to mention names, a hockey player and his buddy.
Okay.
So we sit down, and we have a few beers, pops, And
You know what? Just because our guests call them Pops doesn't mean you have to call them Pops.
I've
on the
always
microphone.
called them Pops.
You have never called them Pops. I call you Pops, but you don't call your drinks Pops. You say, I have some drinks or I have some beers. But
Okay.
listen, if you want to be cool all of a sudden,
no,
I get it.
you can call me out on that. So we all sit down together, or I start have a few drinks with them, and then I have to, kind of get onto some other things at the bar, and but I keep the drinks coming. And so they're having a few, and then it gets after the lunch hour, because we used to have a lot of players drop in there after practice, the Leafs in particular, or the opposing team. And so they sit there and they keep drinking. Well, the place empties out except for these two really good-looking women.
Okay.
Okay?
What time is this? Why are they there? at
That's
this time?
about 2:30.
What bar is this? These bars don't exist anymore.
Yeah. So now the players are looking at the girls are looking at the guys, and the girls come over, and they know who the players are, or the player and his buddy. And so the player that I knew had a girlfriend at the time, and the other guy had a girlfriend. And so, but these two girls were pretty good looking. So they sat there and talked for a while. And then the player in question kept looking at his phone, and he was getting calls from his girlfriend, but he wasn't picking up because he's talking to this other girl. And then his girlfriend figured out that he might be at the bar.
Right.
So he called the bartender, the bar phone, and
She
the
called the
bartender
bartender, yeah.
picked up and said, is my boyfriend there? And the bartender, oh, yeah, he's sitting over in the corner. Yeah, who's he with? Well, he's with his buddy, and she didn't say anything. She's smart enough not to say anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the end of the conversation. Now it's around 4 o'clock, and these guys leave with the girls. And they get into the Jeep, and they drive down to where one of the guys was staying, underground garage. And one's in the front with the girl, and the other's in the back with the girl, and they're necking with the girl. Well, it turns out that the girlfriend of the player is sitting outside in the car.
wow.
She figured it out. She came down. She said,
Wow.
and she drives down to the underground lot behind them and catches them in the car together.
No.
I mean, it was
How
we
did
can
you-
laugh about it now.
No, I
but
mean, obviously-
at the time it was just horrendous.
I mean, in every situation,
I
it
don't
is
think he was
obviously
allowed
hindsight.
back in the bar ever again.
That's fair. That's fair. Now, how did you become aware of this happening?
He told me the story.
Oh, okay,
afterward.
okay, there you
Because I
go.
said, how'd you make out with those two girls? He
And he
well,
said,
it
I
didn't
did make out with them.
didn't quite come to fruition because, anyways, long story short, they stayed together for a while after that. So I don't know. It wasn't that. So maybe she caught him before anything serious happened.
Sure. And just kind of would have assumed the best. Now, you mentioned Gardunis a few times in the span of us recording this, and I feel like we can have an episode specifically dedicated to the stories surrounding that place.
Yeah.
No stranger to the bar industry. Before Frameworth, you owned a bar called Hannibal's, where you kind of cut your teeth there.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned another story that you wanted to get into, and that it had something to do with an earlier conversation we were having.
Well, this is funny because I became pretty good friends over the years with Sidney Crosby's parents,
Right.
who are more closer to my age, even though I'm older than they are, and Jonathan Tave's parents. We just kind of hit it off through various things that we've met and had some fun together, and a lot of things in common. And just a little sidetrack. So we were talking about Claude Giroux's
Yes.
relationship with Sydney, and it was pretty
Contentious
at the beginning. Anyways, I think they're okay now together. But there was Philly and Pittsburgh was a natural rivalry. But I think it was a 2014 World Cup. Or was it 16? One of the two.
Right.
And everybody's staying down at the Harbor Castle, and we'd meet there before the game, walk over to the game, and then, because it was all at Maple Leaf Gardens or the Air Canada Center, whatever it was at the time.
Yeah,
and then
it was 2016, the World Cup of Hockey.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we go back afterwards, and we're meeting, and I see Troy and Trina Crosby and Brian and Andre Taves, or Andre Gilbert, his mom is called. And then there's another couple there, or another 2 women, and I think it was Claude Giroux's mother and aunt or something.
Okay.
So we're all sitting there talking, and I'm saying, Jesus, the Crosbys are talking to the Giroux, and what's going on there? And they were all getting along really well. So that was an interesting thing. And actually, I was sitting with the Crosbys the night before, and the Taves came in. So they didn't know each other well.
Oh,
so
okay.
They knew each other, and they had seen each other at tournaments, but I liked them both, so they sat together, and we all just hit it off.
Right.
My wife Lori and your mom, and so through that tournament, we all got together and had a lot of laughs, and of course, Team Canada won. And they were both saying, Andre Gilbert, Jonathan's mom, said, we started talking about cruise ships, and my wife Lori and I love to go on cruises. We go on quite a few of them. I just think it's the greatest thing. And we talk about it. We send them pictures, the other guys' pictures. And she said, we got to go on a cruise. I've never been on a cruise sometime. And Troy and Trina said, well, if you go, we'll go, because Trina isn't big on boats.
Sure.
She lives in Halifax or Cole Harbour on the water, but she's not big on boats.
Yep. I mean, it is kind of a lot to ask of someone who isn't an enormous fan of cruising in the first place to confine yourself to the middle of the ocean on a boat. Like, the concept of that is a little bit terrifying to some people. I can see that.
Well, exactly. And she's not that big just on boats in general, so now she's going to get on a cruise ship, but she sees the pictures and it looks really inviting. Now, Lori and I have evolved from younger days, so we're going on nicer cruise ships and
spending some money,
spending a little bit more money on them to get the right ship, et cetera, because it's all about the ships.
And you've got to, if you're bringing, the parents of hockey players who are probably used to accommodate. I mean, you think about the accommodations that they were in just in the hotel lobbies at the World Cup of Hockey.
Right.
There's a certain standard that's being set, and a vacation wouldn't be a vacation.
We'll say a minimal standard anyway.
Sure.
So they keep insisting that we should all go on a cruise together. I know all about the cruises, so let's arrange a cruise. The Taves, the Crosbys, myself, and another good friend of the Crosbys, a couple, Mike and Charlene. So we end up deciding to. So they want to go, but they want to test it. Sid's mom is not that big on a lot. She just wants to test it.
Sure.
So I only want to go on a 4-day cruise. Well, I said, geez, I don't know. Caribbean's really nice, but a 4-day cruise really limits the kind of cruise ships we can go on.
Right.
So I keep telling them, I'm not sure. I mean, the only ones I can find are like Carnival cruises. He said, that really, I mean, it's a party ship, yes, but it's not the highest standard ship. And
it feels like it's for a younger demographic whose goal is to party more so than
party. But even the ship and the ships that they leave for those 4-day cruises are probably the lower end of their cruise line.
Well, they don't have to deal with the open water quite as much, so they don't have to be as large.
They're only going from Cape Canaveral or whatever they call it now over to Nassau, and then one other, and some private island and back. They only have 4 days. So I kept telling them, geez, you're not going to get get the best cabins that you can get.
Sure.
I'm trying to convince them, you don't want to do this, but because you're going to get a bad impression, you're never going to want to go on a cruise again. And I'm telling them this, okay? Now we get down there. We're there the night before, probably the best part of the trip. We get on the cruise ship. And this thing is a dump.
Oh, no.
Oh, it's the worst ship I had been on in years.
Oh, no.
It hasn't been refurbished in years. We did get some nice suites. Made sure they got nice suites, and I got a really good deal on it. And so we're all on this cruise ship for 4 days. Starts out, it's kind of rainy.
Oh, right. Of course it's going to be.
And then we get there, and then we all meet for dinner, and it's not that great. And the weather is kind of cool the next day, and we're heading over to Nassau, and I see Troy and Trina there with a sweater on. It's kind of overcast, and we sit down next to them and say, how are you enjoying it so far? And they roll their eyes. This is cruising, right? On top of that, there had to be 200 kids on a school trip from Brazil. Just like 14 to 16-year-olds running around, making noise. It was just the most horrendous trip. We get into Nassau. They like good cigars. My wife had a friend that said, I got a place that you can get cigars at that are really good. So we believe the guy. So we go there to get some cigars. And turns out they're knockoff cigars that we paid top dollar for. This was the most horrendous trip that you could go on a cruise ship. Now, we still had fun.
You make what you can of it.
And they're great people, the Crosbys and the Taves and the Surretts. So we had so much fun under the conditions.
Yes.
I never live it down. They're blaming me. I warned them time and time again, you don't want to go on this ship. And they said, no, 4 days is fine. They'll have a different perspective on it. That's my perspective.
So we put together a birthday video for you for your 65th birthday, which happened earlier this summer. And the Crosbys sent in a video to say happy birthday. And even in that video, they mentioned, like, hopefully we see you again soon. Hopefully it's not on a cruise ship of your choosing. It's amazing.
It's just one thing after another. That's just step one of those trips. And then the other one would have been, and I'll save for another time, was our trip to Italy.
Well, I think based on this one, I think we're going to have a lot of success. Those were a lot of great stories, and I know that you've got a ton more. I know I could jump in with a few more as well, but I love this process of just kind of exploring the lighter side of the world of sports marketing, not so business oriented, but I think every so often we need to step back.
I will say this, is that when you have that personal relationship, you have a chance of screwing up your business side of it.
That's true.
If I got him on a 2-week cruise on that ship, we'd never be handling Sidney Crosby or Jonathan Toews
maybe
again.
Sidney goes to Upper Deck or something like that as a result of it, because the upper deck of your cruise ship hadn't been refurbished in a while.
Exactly.
Wow. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing those. And hey, if you're out there and you have any questions about what these events are like, or you want to hear some more stories oriented towards, I don't know, the All-Star games or specific tournaments or things like that, feel free to send us an email, SignOffPod@frameworth.com. Once again, make sure you check out the Suspendables podcast with Jim Jerome. Subscribe to that. Make sure you're subscribed to this podcast as well, the Sign Off. Take screenshots of it and email it to that same email address, SignOffPod@frameworth.com, to be entered in a draw for a chance to win a signed Mitch Marner jersey and a signed Sidney Crosby jersey. 2 separate prizes, only one of each, and they'll be given out at random to one of the subscribers who takes part in this competition. So, Dad, thanks again for sharing all those stories. That was a lot of fun. We'll do this again soon. If you have any recommendations of stories or different elements and avenues of discussion, feel free to send those to us. But without extending this too much, that is it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth Sports Marketing. I'm Mikey Aaronworth, host of the Sign Off Podcast, and this is us signing off. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions. Executive producers Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth, signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it!